Happy to say I'm back with Louis Hartley, and he's in Ecuador, and I'm in sunny Sea Point today, which is a great place to be. Puccelli performed here last night.
Okay.
Louis, the Italian opera singer at the stadium. We
Right.
couldn't get tickets, but apparently it was just out of this world. I mean, 60,000 people in that stadium. Quite an event. Sorry to have missed it.
Yeah, well, a lot of those top performers, you get one opportunity and then you don't get another opportunity.
I know. But Louis, back back to where we kind of left off. We were just talking about map reading, and I think it's of interest to people because today a soldier doesn't really need to know an awful lot about map reading because there's so much technology. But in our day, it was always a very challenging exercise, staying on top of where you were and where you were going. And we were just talking about map reading in Wanky National Park, where there are no features, no hills to speak of, very few river lines, and it could be very difficult going.
Yeah, it was what, 1972, 73, and it was tough, honest. It is very flat, it's very sandy, so it's hard on your feet. There was no water. 1973 was a terrible drought, and so we would get into positions and cross that area and get into the Matexi, which at least there you'd find a river, even though it was full of sand. But one of the worst things with map reading is that you're doing it by compass bearing. And, if you don't, if you understand that if you're right-handed, your right leg is always stronger than your left, and you will walk in a circle. There's nothing worse than walking back on your tracks. I mean, it's like unbelievable because you just spent an hour and a half walking in a circle.
I remember we got lost in Mozambique once. The late Nigel Turon was the troop officer, and it was a cloudy day. You're in that sort of woodland, no rivers, no water, and my word, did we get lost? And it was the end of the op, because one of the chaps drank the cough mixture out the medic's pack. He was so desperate for moisture, and he went he went nuts. And that's why they had to abort. A helicopter had to come in and fetch him, and the whole operation fell apart. But that was all because we were we were very lost and we couldn't find water. That yeah,
Yeah,
those that wouldn't happen today. With GPSs and stuff, it's a walk in the park. But we didn't have that luxury.
well, I tell you this, Hannes, if you study the latest sort of war technology, the Russians can switch off those satellites, and then you're going to be back to basics, boy.
Well, I think that's why the Ukrainians have got to be careful with Elon Musk because I think, almost totally dependent on Starlink.
Yeah.
And Musk could turn that off. So there you've got this one youngster from Pretoria who's, who's actually got leverage over the battlefields now. I mean, it's quite incredible when you think about it.
I don't know if you're aware that there's another one coming up. I think it's Amazonia. It's another like Starlink coming from Amazon, but Um, they're battling to get it started, and I think that that's part of that sort of conflict technology between two
Well,
companies.
I think where Musk is ahead of the rest of them is he's got so many more satellites already
Yeah,
up in the air. A lot of people have got to catch up. I mean, governments can't keep up with this guy. The European space program is lights year behind Musk.
yeah, he's a very smart character, and you actually wonder what his motivations are, but he's a very smart guy. And if you
Yeah,
listen to his father, his father's still somewhere near Waterkloof in Pretoria. And if you listen to his father talk about Elon as a kid, and one of his remarks was that Elon can never be a real politician because his brain is faster than his mouth, and so fundamentally finds it quite difficult to tell little nose pointing lies. So he's pretty straight, and I think that's
I think
good
so.
for. I think that's good for the politics of today because there's so much, misinformation being shoved out there.
Yeah, first and foremost, he's a mathematician, and obviously an exceptionally good mathematician. And apparently he's got a phenomenal IQ.
Yeah,
So
over 160, they say. It's very high. And those people are difficult to communicate with. I worked with a biochemist who had an IQ of 160. And he was talking and anticipating what I was going to say next, which kind of silences you because he's so far quicker than you that it's really quite difficult to communicate.
talking about innate talent takes me closer to where we want to be. And I wanted to talk to you about Daryl Watt and when you're first meeting with him. But Daryl has these guys coming out periodically to learn to track. And they want to learn about bushcraft and everything. And I watch with interest because, yes, I'm sure they will learn. But just like Musk is a born mathematician, Daryl was, I think, one of those sort of freaks of nature who was born with this innate ability to read the bush, and he just has a special relationship with his environment, which not everybody, well, very few people have. So, he's got a sort of built-in talent that, and I'm not sure how much of that you can teach people. I mean, we've all done tracking courses and stuff, and we could probably track up to reasonably well up to a point. But he's on another level. But he's just blessed. Um, some people just, no matter how hard you try, you're never going to be able to perform at the same level as a guy like that.
He's an amazing guy. I still have quite a lot of communication with him. But I first met him at Mukumbura, and it was a typical army situation, hurry up and wait. And so I was sitting with my stick of guys underneath some trees, swatting tsetse flies, horrible bastards. And I saw this guy walking past, and I thought he had no rank, no insignia at all. And he turned and came and sat with us in the rocks. And I realized then who he was, because I'd heard about him through Alan Savory. And then he started talking about bush law. And, I was brought up more or less from the age of 7 in the bush, so I had a pretty good understanding. But as you say, he was on a totally different level. And because we were always short of water, that was the first subject that we covered in a lot of detail about watching the birds at sunup and see where they fly and always go upstream, not downstream, and then look and see where the baboons are. And fascinating. He spent about 2 hours with us, and quite honestly, he saved my life.
Really,
And
just what you learned.
yeah, and he was so, what do you want to call it?
Humble.
He was just so balanced, and he had very little ego. He had the same rank as I did, but with the SAS rank, that's a different rank. But I subsequently ran into him a couple of times in the next 8 years, and I actually found him on WhatsApp. I think somebody gave me his WhatsApp number, and I communicated with him, and he remembered that Mukumbura 2 hours. So fascinating guy. Yeah, I mean, as you say, a totally different level. And in many respects, um, bush intuitive, I think, is the best word. And he taught me, he said, listen, remember, you're always going to leave tracks, and you're in a perilous environment. And when you've finished what you're walking in the direction, just turn back and walk 200 meters on your track. Remember the buffalo and sit and watch your tracks. And I remember that clearly. And subsequently to that meeting, we were deployed along the Mukumbura River, which was sand. And we were told to ambush a particular area. We weren't told why, typically. And we kind of got into position at last light, and I didn't like the position. And I remember Daryl saying, just if you have a gut intuition, move. And we moved. And about midnight, 300 crossed where we'd been. We'd have been annihilated. I walked down there in the morning at like 4:45 in the morning, and I saw this bloody swath. I thought it was elephants. And then I saw, camouflage things, discarded stuff. And I was on the radio, and within 20 minutes, fire force were there, and we watched the battle. We actually put up an ambush to see the guys coming back, which was quite successful because quite a few people ran back on the tracks. But man, I just remember him saying, if you have a gut thing, listen to it. And even to this day, it's important.
Mm.
Yeah.
Louis, just talk us through the 1RR operation that you were involved in. I think 75, 76, going into Mozambique, across the Rua River, I think it was. Just what went
Yeah,
on
I
there?
think we were based at that stage at Mount Darwin, and we were told we were going to be involved in a major operation. I can't remember the term or the nom de plume that was given it, but we were told to prepare that we were going to walk about 36, 40 kilometers into Mozambique and end up at the Rhodesia River. And it was the whole company. So it was well over 100 and at least 110, 100, 115 guys. And we walked in 3 columns. Took about 36 hours because we were loaded. I mean, we had every space was loaded with ammunition and told, don't take too much food because, the Air Force will resupply you. Well, that was another story. But so we walked in, we started quite early in the morning, and we got to the location on the edge of the river at about 2 a.m. And we stopped every hour because, Hannes, we were so heavily loaded with ammunition and mortars and you name it. Every hour we'd stop so that, the stronger and the weaker guys could help each other. We got to the river at about 2 a.m. and it was a bright moonlight night. And we stopped and on the bank, and we could see across the river, which it must have been about September. And we could see these guard towers on the other side of the river. And so I had binoculars and I was looking to see if there was any activity because it was an old Portuguese army base and couldn't see anything. And then went forward, sort of dropped a lot of our heavy packs, just took our main ammunition. I went forward and I recce'd through the river on smooth rocks without falling in the water and got up against the other bank, which is about at least 10 foot, 15 foot high, with cattle tracks that had come down, game tracks that had come down. And we got across, all of us, one of our sergeant majors, who was a very unpopular guy, he slipped into the river in front of me between 2 rocks. And he couldn't get out because it was, that slippery algae stuff. And, all the troops behind me, leave him there, leave him there. I said, no. I put an FN barrel in the water, pulled him out. And anyway, we got up from the bank and we were told the Air Force were coming at 4 a.m. And I tell you, at 4 a.m., there with the strobe lights from the cameras. And they came in at, I don't know, 200 feet. And they dropped a string of 250 or 5, I can't say exactly, 250 or 500-pound bombs in front of us. And we were behind the bank, so we didn't get the shockwave. But that camp was 12 square kilometers, Hannes. And they came in, I think 6 or 8 of them, and the sky just went orange. I'll never forget it. And then we got up and we advanced into their camp, and we got into a major sweep line, which is, as you know, pretty difficult. And we swept through those bomb craters, and some of them were 15 feet deep. There wasn't much opposition. I think most of it had been annihilated, and a lot of them had done the standard thing and gapped it to the north. And the there were SAS and RLI ambushes set up on that side, and all we could hear was gunfire. I mean, I don't think I used more than maybe 20 rounds. And we sat through a hospital and Scandinavian food and sardines and cheeses, and well, the hospital had been basically obliterated. Whoever was in there was no longer there, with just pieces. And fortunately, we found that food because we had none. Anyway, they told us we were only going to be there maybe 3-5 days. We were there nearly 2 weeks, and we found a major arms cache, just strangely, with a guy going off to relieve himself with a bayonet, and heard a clink, and the next minute we uncovered an arms cache. We had, I think, 6 or 8 helicopters come in and take it out. I remember that one of the helicopters had Roland Vincent on. He was the mechanic or the air tech guy, and from Mozambique, Fort Vic, and we chop it out the stuff, and then they said, "Oh, the Air Force, the DACs are going to come in and drop the food." Well, that didn't happen because we didn't have any strobe lights and no GPS or any of that sort of stuff, and we had cloud cover. Fortunately, cloud cover for quite a lot of the time because it was hot down there. Daryl never, and you never really mentioned in your book that few hard men, the arduous kind of climate, that the Mopani flies, it was tough. Anyway, so we were there 11 days, and eventually, 11 days, we found water, fortunately, and I'd taken a few sticks of water on, thank God I did, and we eventually walked out back to where we'd come from. And when we got back, we looked like, what would you call it? Like ragged men. Our clothes were done. The stitching came apart, and people just said, "Well, tough. I come out with hardly any pants on, so what?" So that was a major exercise. But I remember it taught me one thing, honest. The body can handle a certain amount of water deprivation, but after a while, food is a major, major thing. Your whole brain starts figuring out on food. And we were finding papayas. And we had to be very careful because Frelimo was sending in investigative patrols to see what was going on. And we had quite a few instances where we were in instant ambush, just take cover wherever you can. And we had a couple of brushes, but they decided not to come too close after that, because there was no Zonu lot guys. They'd gone, and whatever remained. It took us about 2 days to clear that camp because it was huge. 12 square kilometers. It had a front against the Rio River of about 2 kilometers. But fortunately, we had a company of people, So it was a major exercise. And it was probably the first time the territorial army had been directly involved, C Company 1RR. So, yeah.
Louis, just talk me through again. You mentioned last time that ambush, the vehicle ambush you were involved in. I think
it was the other side of Chief to Tito, about 20 Ks.
Yeah. So what actually happened there?
We were actually about to leave. We'd finished our 6-week or 8-week stint, and we got this radio message that the keep commander down there had been infiltrated by the opposition. And so we were sent down there, 14 of us. I was the lead guy. I had a guy with me, a very good guy, who got injured. And so we got down there at about 6 a.m. and typically they pushed a whole lot of cattle track over their tracks. But it was about March 1976, middle of March, Ides of March, and so I found the tracks and found them going, and I wasn't too sure, but I had a feeling it was quite a big party of people of opposition. And tracked them up, and it was pretty difficult because it was very thick bush, March. There'd been quite a bit of rain. Found the tracks and moved up the side of this hill. And then they got clever and they walked into a stream of water. And I tracked up ahead with my MAG guy, Tom, hell of a good guy. And we couldn't really identify that bombshell. And so at about 11 a.m., we called for the trucks to come back. And as the trucks were coming back, we loaded up. And unfortunately, the trucks just had sandbags, Mercedes-Benz 4.5s with sandbags, but no peripheral cover, no steel. And we left and we were going back up the slope. And the 4.5s were heavily loaded, mainly because of the sandbags. And we weren't going very fast. And I saw this guy running to the road. And one of those Intef trucks that just come past, and I heard it burst with gunfire, but I didn't really, because of the noise of the engine, I didn't really take my cognizance of it. And then this guy on the road ran in and he fired an RPG-7 at us, and I knew we were in an ambush. And it was bad. I could actually see them from the side of the road, and what kicked in was just that total bloody aggression. You're so pissed off. You just, I think I went through 4 magazines, didn't even know it. I was shooting back. And unfortunately, my MAG guy, Tom, who's in Australia now, he loved that weapon. And I told you, that thing chatted. And I think we gave them as much as they got, but I had 4 guys that were seriously shot. And I'd done a paramedics thing with an Australian guy who actually who'd been in Vietnam. And he said, one of the best things to patch up bullet wounds is plastic. Use a bandage and plastic, stop the blood. And so that's what I did. It was bad. Anyway, the first truck got through and I was like praying to God the second truck, because we had to get up over the ridge. Those trucks were just riddled. And got my truck then ran down the slope about 250 meters, and I heard the second truck coming, and I knew it was going to be bad. And my 2IC and the second truck got shot in the back of the head, and he was unconscious. I had to basically keep him alive. Fortunately, first chopper arrived about 20 minutes later, took out all the trucks were US. They were just shot to hell. The engines and everything got the 4 guys out. 2 guys didn't make it. Got back to Mount Darwin. And with glass, one of the things about glass is you get shards of glass and they shatter all over you. And, I didn't have time to look at myself because there's so much pressure. But I got back and we had I think a lieutenant colonel, doctor from Harare, Salisbury, and he looked at me and he said, "Man, we got to get rid of this glass." And when you get glass in the face, you get little cuts and your whole face is full of blood. But we got through it, and man, they brought the trucks in, and the medical guy, doctor, the lieutenant colonel came and said, "Shit, boy, you've just used up all of your luck. Don't bother about lottery tickets." It was hard, but experience.
Louis, did you spend quite a bit of time at Mount Darwin?
We were sort of operated out of Mount Darwin. We went towards, we went to the east, to the west. We were based at one time at Rhodesia, and quite a lot of time on Rhodesia. We used to say to ourselves that, we knew that Kandaya, Cheweshi area so well, we didn't need maps. we got to know the area so well. And an interesting thing is, we took over Rashinga one day from a group of guys, and I knew they weren't from our locality, and they turned out to be Foreign Legion. They had a Foreign Legion
Oh,
company there,
yeah.
and I mean, I don't speak a lot of French, but the commander spoke pretty good English. They were tough guys, and they came out um, hard. Really, you could tell they were tough, and they left us quite a lot of stuff, which was very nice of them, very good. And then we had that bloody disaster after that of that. What did they call it? It was set up by that guy.
Détente. Détente.
Um, Detente, yeah. And we had that harmony period. We were annihilating them at that
I know.
stage. And they were able to recover from that.
I know. That was disastrous. That was John
And
Forster.
it was a disaster. And half of it, or 50% of it, was that Nationalist Party guy, BJ Foster. What an idiot. He allowed
Mm,
allowed the whole setup to happen.
I know. That was a terrific setback. As you say, the enemy were on their knees at that point, and that ceasefire came at the
It was terrible.
perfect
I
time.
had a couple of experiences just quickly. We operated sometimes with other units who were from the police or whatever. And I used to get so irritated because we would get into a position where, with my guys, it was hold fire till we were really pretty close. And we got two situations where we had them, and these guys lost their nerve and opened fire. And it's so frustrating when you actually got them and they don't know you're there, and then somebody
Blows them.
can't, the nerve breaks or whatever. In the second instance, we were going out to a drop-off point, and we had a pookie in front of us. He was about 500, maybe a kilometer ahead of us. And the next minute, he came under fire, heavy fire. And he managed to keep going, but you could hear it. It's like a hose pipe. When you turn a hose pipe on full, that's many, many. And we were around the corner, but there was a kind of open flay. And so we debussed and advanced in a sweep line across this flag towards these guys. They didn't know we were there. And, we got really close. And then unfortunately, they got into a river line. And the same thing. We got these new 4-month guys from IR, and they lost their bloody nerve. And we had them. If we'd got to that river line, they wouldn't have made it. And another time, we were out on patrol. We were told, location pickup in 15 minutes, and it was up towards Centenary. And sure enough, we found the LZ, and choppers came in, picked us up, and we ended up in a stop line with RLI, again in the riverine bush area. And I just remember Pat Armstrong was the KCAR commander, and I knew him, I knew his family pretty well, and he was saying, "Okay, you designate stop 3," and then he heard my voice, and he said, "Is that you, Hartley?" And anyway, we trapped these guys in the river line, and then it became evening, and we went into ambush. And quite a few of them escaped. But I tell you, the next morning when we stepped through there, we killed quite a number. And I just remember that term floppies, because that's exactly what they were. It was just, part of what would you call it? C Company 1RR was in it all the time. It was just the way it was. We used to call ourselves the Charlies. We were the first in. So, all territorial. So, I admire the territorial guys because we had two jobs. Not only did we have army, but we also had, civilian work that we had to
Yeah.
conduct in a very short
Yeah.
space of time. And shorter
Yeah.
and shorter.
Yeah. It's amazing that the guys managed to do both.
That
And
what would you call it? That determination, that camaraderie, it's not replaceable. It's not.
no, no, that's right. It's what kept that country going for as long as it did. Uh, that sense of belonging and that brotherhood that just made everybody want to do that much better, rather
Well,
than
I think we
let
became,
anybody down.
I think we started off as kind of amateurs with a fair amount of, oh, well, it's not going to happen to us. But then it does happen to you. And then you realize, hey, you better get as professional as possible because otherwise you're not going to make it. You're going to collect something you don't want. So, yeah,
Louis, we were talking about Gordon Olds and
yeah.
your time with him as a pro pilot. Uh, that was all happening in the Northeast, I imagine.
No,
He
no,
was
no.
from
It was, the CEO at the time called me into his office and said, "You from Fort Vic area? We just had that horrible incident where a whole lot of Selous Scouts had been killed. They'd gone into the Chibi Reserve
Johnny
and come
Whitfield.
out in the same road, which just never did. And so he said to me, I want you to go and do a recce, aerial recce of that Ratanga, Tokwe, Lundi area and tell me what it's like for armor to operate there." And
Okay.
so I took a 2.5 and my gunner, twin Brownings, and my driver, and we went to Fort Vic to Torreal, and which is what was right next to the airport, and waited for this prop pilot to arrive. And the aircraft was, of course, at the airport. And here comes Gordon Olds, which I've known since I was like 10. He says, "Oh, well, let's go before it's too hot." And so we went up and we flew over that Ratanga, Lundi, up and down, all over the place. But man, I tell you this, the thermals got started at about 10, 11 o'clock. We must have been up there 3 hours. But those thermals were bouncing that Cessna all over the place. Unfortunately, I hadn't had much breakfast because I tell you, I had myself and another guy from Territorial, but it was tough going. I mean, when we got back to the airport, I don't think we were white, we were green. It was a good experience.
Louis, fast forward to the 1980 elections and your involvement and events around
It
that
was,
period.
that was really interesting. Honest. We all of a sudden we became part of a battle group, and there were four battle groups. There were, I think, one well SAS and few RLI guys, and I can't remember exactly, but I think four 25-pound artillery and the whole squadron of armored cars. And by then, armored cars had become pretty big. And we, of course, had E Squadron, which was the tanks, which had been taken over by a German guy being on Leopard tanks. Um, and I was deployed with, again, C Squadron to SAS, and it was Garth Barrett was the commander. And I knew him very well. And we got deployed, first of all, south of Salisbury, to the sort of Beatrice area, because there was a, can't remember the name of the TTL, but just south of Beatrice, pretty nasty bunch of people. And we were there for like 3 days, and then we were told go north. And so we moved. There was a big bunch of army, I can tell you. We moved up north, and we were based at Mount Darwin, and we were basically ready to take on a few of those assembly points. And I always remember this clearly. They brought in, monitoring force guys, Brits, and they came in these pretty sophisticated. We had Dakotas, they had C-130s, I think, and they would basically try and keep us apart. I just remember all the RLI and SAS and ourselves were just lined up against the runway, and as they came in, we dropped our trousers and showed them the moon. that's what we felt about them. And I just remember the one Brit guy came up to me and he said, I see you guys carry MAGs. I said, "Oh, we carry them." So in our army, they're vehicle mounted. I said, "Well, yeah, we use them direct." That was it was infuriating because I tell you this, Hannes, I know for a fact because I knew two of the guys were being paid by the Brits. Ken Flower was one. My father told me, be careful of your security. And
Mm.
the other thing, be very careful. And the other thing, because there were leaks coming out of that jock, because we knew, because we got deployed to places, and there was nobody there. They'd been forewarned. And I'm sure you had much of the same sort of thing. And I just
This
remember
is
afterwards,
why you'll carry on.
I just remember afterwards that the British Airway pilots used to tune in and listen to our radio comms because it was so entertaining. But we just got better and better at communication from being not so good to very good. So, but yeah, I got deployed to Grand Reef after being down at as I think I mentioned, down at the Nyanyatsa irrigation scheme to keep the flow of the tea and the border timbers open. And I had one incident there where the Elam mission massacre. I don't know if you
Mm.
remember that.
Yeah,
Um,
remember it well. Yeah.
well, we were, instructed to go up there and take control of that mission after it had happened. And we went up there and, the police forensics had been there and there wasn't very much left, but it was still obvious what had happened. And it was a bright moonlight night. The buildings, I mean, everybody fled. And man, it was eerie. It was deadly still. Never slept. Um, we had 5 cars in a star position facing out, but horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, that was that might not have happened if those people had listened. I mean, they were warned,
Yeah,
but
they've been, previously, I don't know if you knew that, they've been up there in Erushinga and they relocated. And man, yeah. Unfortunately, I'm sure you know this, you hit these zealots
yeah.
who won't listen to, you know, they won't
But
listen to reason.
they had made up their
And
minds
you
in a
try
way
and explain. I mean,
about
even to this day, honest, what's going on in the world. You've got this belief that I mean, we're heading into Easter, and it's quite an interesting scenario here. At Easter, it's quite a big celebration. It's probably as big as Christmas here in in Ecuador. Um, so it's you're watching all the kids with these balloons, with these flashing lights, and it's quite a big celebration. And it's interesting because today is a holiday. It's not a holiday in terms of on the calendar, but because of this thing that happened with this virus, which I studied pretty carefully, and the shutdown of the world economics. Ecuador was a huge, has invested an enormous amount of money in tourism, and I mean that's a beautiful country to visit. And now you've got minimum flow of tourists. They still come, but not in the volumes that they used to. And so the newly elected president, who was elected last Sunday, thank God, because the opposition candidate was a closet Marxist. Um, but he declared today a holiday, extra holiday, to get people out of the towns and the cities to go to the tourist locations to stimulate the finance out there. So it's a very it's a very people-orientated country.
Okay.
Um,
And very
and
Christian.
one thing that really interested me when I first came out, the government had overstepped the mark on some legal issue. Boy, the people came out and they confronted. They got into the cities. They shut the country down for like 10 days. And that's what needs to happen in Southern Africa. But I can't see it happening.
Uh, Louis, just a quick one on obviously, you're talking about the leaks and the Ronen Reid-Daly debacle, which your brother was so involved in as Ron's
Yeah.
defense. But the genesis of that was Ronen Reid-Daly was just too ahead of the game in a way, as far as the infiltration and the intelligence failures, and he was making too much noise, and he needed to be silenced, and that was where British intelligence got involved. And you got to give it to them; they did a masterful job. I'm convinced Dan Stannard was part of that whole plan, but it worked, and it doesn't reflect very well on our political and military hierarchy, the fact that they didn't see through it. But the whole story about the ivory and Reid-Daly being involved in a big ivory poaching ring was all disinformation that was planted by the Brits to to muddy the waters, create suspicion. Word of this spread very quickly through the ranks, and everybody was talking about it. Have you heard about this? Have you heard about that? To this day, people still believe that Ron Reid-Daly was involved in ivory poaching, and it's just a big, fat, monstrous lie. And it still makes me angry when I come up against people who allude to that. But that was all part of a great big deception plan, and it worked.
Yeah, I was telling a story. You can decide whether to use this or cut it out, but um, I knew Garth Barrett very well, not only in the army but outside the army. And at one time, I wanted to when I was in infantry to move across there, and he said to me, it's a he was a very smart guy, and I actually spent time with him in South Carolina, and he said to me, "I want you to understand that you're probably not physically built to be a successful SAS guy." Um, he said, "I think there are other specialist units that you'd be better at." I'll never have forgotten this. And when I was with him in the first battle group, he said to me, "We've got to be very careful because there are leaks." And I knew that because my sister is still married to ex-RLI, who became a lieutenant colonel in the engineers. And so we were very much military orientated. And my father, was honorary colonel of the 10RR. And so, we were living it every day. And God said to me, "We've got to be very careful. We can't talk about anything about our deployments. We just do it." And at the time, I had some very firm beliefs that right at the top of the jock, we had people that were being bribed with British pensions. I won't say anymore. And when the election had finished, which we knew was going to be rigged because we found ballot boxes in the rivers, and I mean, it was ridiculous. That was that Mount. When we got back to Capt barracks, we were told that the senior commanders were going to come and see us, and it was fortunately by then I think most of us had realized what was happening. And I said to Garth, I was standing next to Garth, and I saw this, staff car arrive, and I climbed these red tab people, and I said, "Garth, I'm taking my barrier off. I will not salute these guys." And he did the same. "We will not salute these guys." And they knew bloody well because they saw us. They came up to us and talked to us, but they realized why we were pissed off. And then subsequent to that, I went to Army headquarters, which is a total chaos. And I went looking for my file because my father said to me, find your file, get your file out. Don't let any of these opposition guys find your file. And I went into the Army information room, and one of the guys, I can't remember his name, good guy, he'd gone in there and he was, I think, basically a captain, and he'd taken 90% of the photographs. And there were photographs of us with the tanks and all that, and fortunately they were gone because we
Okay.
knew the potential for being targeted is still, it's still there. You've got to be so careful of that being targeted. It's called targeted individual, TIA, yeah, in the States. And yeah, I must tell you one story quickly, which just shows you the level of at the time the armored cars was commanded by an American, who's now deceased, Daryl. And he was a really good guy, but he'd been in Vietnam, he'd been shot 3 or 4 times, and then I knew him pretty well. And we got instructed one day to move the whole of Sea Squadron to Bite Bridge. And I thought, what the hell, Bite Bridge? We know that there's South African Armored Corps on the other side of the river. Why do they want us there? Anyway, those are the orders. So 4 o'clock in the morning, off we go. A hell of a big convoy. Because, when you move a whole squadron of 25 cars and spares and mechanics, and I mean the backup, the ream backup for the armor is a lot with ammunition and the whole bit. And I'm not joking, I reckon it was more than 50 vehicles. And we got to Fort Vic, and the woman's volunteering. Fantastic. Because, Fort Vic was right about 300 and something kilometers. And when you're moving armored vehicles, and we didn't have low loaders, and so we got there and they looked after us. And the next morning we took off outside. We'd been outside the Flamboyant Hotel in sort of lagered up, and we took off again. We got to Rotanga, and then it started getting hot, and those 4-cylinder engines in the Eland were not great on a cooling thing, so it took us a while. But we got to Bite Bridge, and I remember Don Price, it was one independent company, came to me and he said, why are you here? And I said, we were told to come here. Those were my orders, and it took quite a while to get all the other vehicles in because some of them were, needed radiators replaced and this and that. And anyway, he must have got on the radio to Jock headquarters and said, "Look, armored cars are here." And the next morning at 9 o'clock, in flew a Beechcraft Baron with General Walls, and he said, "Why are you here?" I said, "You're the general. I was told to get you." And he said, "You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be in Victoria Falls." I said,
Yes.
"Oh, and so turn around, and you can imagine with all those vehicles and the gasoline and the
What had
engines.
happened? I mean, who gave the order?
Well, I subsequently had kind of figured out that Daryl Winkler either had been at a hell of a party the night before, or he didn't listen to the O group, and he got it back to front because he was an American.
Jeez,
And
what a
so we
person.
then had to move from Bite Bridge to Victoria Falls, and that took 2 stops. We had to climb Esigadini up into the Medibini and Highveld with armored vehicles, and took us altogether about 2.5 days to get to Victoria
Hmm.
Falls. But that's where we were. That's where we were supposed to be. And and then, of course, we had that whole operation, the most successful land operation conflict with Zebra Battalion, Zebra across the river with AJ Erasmus. But I was in Vic Falls for about more than 3 months. We were, ready in case they came across the Victoria Falls Bridge. But subsequently to that, Daryl got promoted to um, Llewellyn Barracks as the commander of the what they used to call him the practice battalion. And of course, he just sculpted back to the United States. So then we got a Colonel von Kraan from Bloemfontein, hell of a good guy. And he was in command of the armored cars for the last sort of 6 or 8 months. And I just remember him, he walked in, I mean, Colonel, and you're not anywhere near that rank. And he came in and he called all the officers together, the senior officers, and he said, look, I'm basically a textbook soldier. I've never done operational command.
Deployment. Mm.
I've never done that. So he said, I'm here basically to learn from you guys because you know a hell of a lot more about operational functions, not what the textbook says, how you deal with, like engines that are overheating and how you get into position in the bush. And he was a really good guy. He actually wrote me a letter of commendation, which I had lost so much of that. So, that's
Yeah.
life. I'll tell you honest, the one thing the army taught me a lot, a hell of a lot, is actually managing people, understanding motivations. And even to this day, I think it's really valuable. It's something you never forget.
Louis, I'm going to end it there.
Okay.
Again, been a hell of an interesting. And thanks for your time
Yeah, no
and
problem.
wish you a very happy Easter.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll be in touch.
Yeah, I'm going back to the farm today. It's 2,500 feet down, but it's a it's a fantastic country, and you know, I sent you I sent you a lot of pictures
Yeah.
on WhatsApp, which I hope you might be able to use. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of the military stuff because it got left behind, and I had to get out of Zimbabwe
Yeah.
in 2001 in a hell of a hurry. So a lot of that stuff's gone.
No, but thanks for everything. Thanks for your time and the stories and thanks for the photos and stuff that you've sent. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think, in the initial stages, you were right in that you dealt with the regular soldiers, and they had a hell of a commitment. But to tell you, the territorial guys also had a hell of a commitment.
Oh, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
Cheers, buddy.